The subway thundered through the dark tunnels of New York, the screech of the rails echoing in the crowded car. Jack sat hunched in his seat, his hands buried in his pockets. Inside one of them, folded and creased, was the letter that had ended everything. He had unfolded it too many times already, but the words still burned in his mind. Position terminated, due to company downsizing. 7 years, that's how long he had given to that company. 7 years of late nights, cancelled weekends, and projects he'd poured himself into. And in a short meeting that morning, with a polite nod and a forced smile, it was gone. No safety net, no second chance, just a letter and a handshake. Around him, the subway car buzzed with the usual noise of the city. Strangers scrolled through their phones, earbuds sealing them off from the world. A man in a suit dozed with his head against the glass. 2 teenagers whispered and laughed, their backpacks squeezed tight against their knees. To them, it was just another evening commute. But for Jack, it felt like the ground had dropped out beneath his feet. His mind spun with questions he couldn't answer. How would he tell Maria? How could they cover rent when the paycheck stopped coming? What about Ethan, who had been saving his allowance for a baseball glove and asking if Dad could pitch to him in the park? Jack pressed his forehead against the cold window, blinking hard. The reflection staring back at him looked like a man defeated. The train jolted and Jack gripped the seat, his chest tight. For years, he had been the provider, the one his family counted on. Now he felt powerless, like he had failed them before the battle had even begun. And then, as the train screeched into the next stop, something shifted. A sound, a movement in the crowd, small, ordinary, almost easy to overlook. But it was about to pull Jack out of his fog and set in motion a chain of events he never could have predicted. The doors slid open at the next station, and a rush of cold air pushed into the car, along with a crowd of new passengers. Jack barely lifted his head until he noticed her. A young mother stepped onto the train, her coat unbuttoned, her cheeks flushed from the wind. In one arm she carried a toddler, his face buried against her shoulder, while with her other hand she dragged a folded stroller behind her. She glanced around, scanning the packed car for an open seat, but every bench was full. The train lurched forward and she stumbled, clutching her child tightly to keep him steady. Jack's first instinct was to stay put. He was drained, worn down to the bone. His legs ached from the long day, and the comfort of sitting was the only relief he had left. But then he caught the flicker of panic in her eyes as she struggled to hold her balance. The boy whined softly, his small hand gripping her coat. Something inside Jack shifted. Maybe it was the memory of Maria carrying Ethan when he was that age, her arms straining, but her voice still soft. Maybe it was just the sight of someone clearly on the edge of exhaustion, the way he himself felt only hours earlier. Before he could talk himself out of it, Jack pushed himself to his feet. He steadied the stroller with one hand so it wouldn't tip and gestured to the empty space. "Here, take my seat." The mother's eyes widened, relief flooding her face. "Thank you, really," she said, settling into the spot with a grateful sigh. The toddler quieted immediately, resting against her. She gave Jack a tired but warm smile. Standing now, Jack gripped the overhead rail. For the first time all day, a strange sense of worth flickered through him. He couldn't fix his job situation in that moment. He couldn't erase the fear of what tomorrow might bring. But he could do this, make someone else's burden a little lighter. And somehow that mattered. The train rumbled forward, and after a pause, the woman glanced up at him. "Long day?" she asked gently, as if she could see past his tired eyes. Jack let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, you could say that." And just like that, the first thread of a conversation began. One that neither of them could have guessed would change everything. The train swayed and groaned as it pushed deeper into the tunnels, a steady rhythm of metal on rails filling the silence between them. The young mother shifted her son higher on her shoulder, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Jack noticed the strap of a worn work bag slipping down her arm, the kind of bag his own wife carried when juggling errands after a long day. She caught his glance and offered a faint smile. "You look like you've had one of those days," she said softly, not unkindly. "I've had plenty myself." Jack gave a tired laugh. "Yeah, you could say that. Lost my job this morning. 7 years there and they cut me loose, just like that. He exhaled sharply, as if the words weighed more once spoken aloud. Feels like the ground's been pulled out from under me. Her smile faded into something gentler, almost knowing. I'm sorry, that's rough. I know because it happened to me once. When I was pregnant, actually. I thought it was the end of everything, but somehow we made it through. Jack blinked, surprised. Really, you lost your job too? She nodded, rocking her son lightly as he dozed. Yeah. I remember riding this very train, terrified of how we'd pay bills, wondering if anyone would give me a chance again. But it wasn't the end. Things found a way of working out. Jack lowered his gaze, the memory of Maria and Ethan pressing at his chest. I don't know. Right now it feels like I'm starting from zero. My little boy deserves better than a dad who comes home with nothing. The woman looked at him steadily, her voice calm but firm. You're not coming home with nothing. You're here. You're still showing up. And you stood up for me when you didn't have to. That tells me something about the kind of man you are. Don't forget that. Jack swallowed, caught off guard by her conviction. For the first time all day, someone had spoken to him like he wasn't invisible, like he still mattered. The train screeched into the next stop, the doors sliding open. Jack held onto the rail a little tighter, sensing that this simple conversation might matter far more than he realised. The train rattled on, fluorescent lights flickering above them. For a while, neither of them spoke. Jack kept his eyes on the floor, replaying her words in his head. You stood up when you didn't have to. That says something about you. No one had said anything like that to him in months. The young mother shifted her son, who stirred but quickly settled again. She reached into her bag, her fingers brushing past diapers and a pack of wipes before pulling out a slim wallet. She hesitated, looking at Jack as if weighing whether to go through with what she was about to do. Listen, she said finally, her tone careful. My husband works at a small tech company. It's not a big firm, but they're always looking for good people. I can't promise anything, but if you'd like, I could pass your name along. Jack looked at her, caught between gratitude and disbelief. You'd really do that, for me? She shrugged lightly, her tired smile returning. Why not? You were kind to me, and I know how it feels to be standing where you are. Sometimes the smallest nudge in the right direction makes all the difference. She pulled out a simple business card, the company's name printed neatly across the front. Holding it out, she added, Don't think of this as a guarantee. Think of it as a door you might try knocking on. Jack froze. His first instinct was to wave it off. He'd already been let down enough, and he wasn't sure he could handle another disappointment. But then he thought of Maria, of Ethan asking about baseball, of the rent bill waiting on the counter at home. His hand shook as he reached for the card. Thank you, he managed, his voice low. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she replied gently. Just don't give up. The train screeched to a halt. She gathered her stroller, adjusted her son on her shoulder, and stepped toward the doors. Before leaving, she turned back with one last smile. You're going to be all right, Jack. And then she was gone, disappearing into the tide of passengers on the platform. Jack stood there, clutching the card as if it were made of glass. For the first time that day, something stirred inside him that wasn't fear. It was the faintest spark of hope. Jack carried the card home like it was something fragile. He slipped it into his wallet, telling himself not to expect too much. Still, just knowing it was there made him feel a little less empty. When he stepped into the apartment that night, the smell of pasta sauce filled the air. Maria was at the stove, humming softly as she stirred. At the table, Ethan sat with crayons scattered around him, drawing crooked little figures that looked like baseball players. Jack forced a smile, kissed Maria on the cheek, and ruffled Ethan's hair. But when his son looked up with wide, hopeful eyes and asked, Dad, are you going to work tomorrow? The smile faltered. Jack crouched down, his voice gentle. Not tomorrow, buddy. Dad's figuring things out. Later, after Ethan was asleep, Jack finally slid the folded letter across the counter. Maria read it without a word, her face tightening as she reached the end. She pressed her lips together, then put her hand over his. We'll be okay, she whispered. But Jack could hear the worry under her calm. The days that followed blurred together. Jack sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, rewriting his resume, polishing his LinkedIn page, and sending out applications. He forced himself to hit submit, even when his chest tightened with doubt. By the end of the week, the replies began trickling in. One company sent a polite rejection. Another never wrote back at all. A third finally responded, only to say the position had already been filled. Each no landed heavier than the last. Jack slammed his laptop shut one evening and muttered, "What's the point?" Maria set a cup of coffee in front of him, her eyes tired but steady. "The point is you don't stop trying. Something will come." Jack wanted to believe her, but the weight in his chest refused to lift. That little business card in his wallet began to feel less like a lifeline and more like a tease, yet he couldn't throw it away. Every night he'd take it out, trace the letters of the company name, and wonder if he dared reach out, or if it would only end in one more disappointment. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he was about to make would change everything. Another few days passed, and Jack's routine became a cycle of hope and disappointment. Each morning he checked his inbox. Each night he shut the laptop with a heavier sigh. The silence from Sarah's husband's company gnawed at him. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe it had been nothing more than a kind gesture to lift his spirits. On Tuesday afternoon, he sat at the kitchen table clearing out junk mail, store coupons, delivery ads, messages he normally deleted without a second glance. That's when a subject line caught his eye. Interview invitation. Jack froze. He clicked it open, hardly daring to breathe. The email had been sent yesterday morning. His chest tightened as he read, "We'd like to invite you to an interview this Thursday at 9. Please confirm as soon as possible." His hands shook. He nearly missed it. If he hadn't opened his junk folder, the chance would have slipped away entirely. "Maria!" he called, his voice breaking. She hurried in, worry flashing across her face until she saw his expression. "They want me to interview," Jack said, almost breathless. "Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. Her hand flew to her mouth, then she grabbed him in a tight hug. "That's it, Jack. This could be it." Excitement clashed with nerves as he replied, confirming the appointment. Then another wave of worry hit him. Getting there. His Metro card balance was low, enough for the ride downtown, but maybe not the trip back. He turned the card over in his hand, calculating. He could walk home if he had to. Whatever it took, he wouldn't miss this chance. That night, he laid out his one good shirt, pressing it carefully with an old iron, while Ethan watched from the couch. The boy tilted his head, curious. "Dad, are you going to work tomorrow?" Jack glanced at him, the iron in his hand pausing mid-stroke. "Not tomorrow," he said softly, "but maybe the day after." When Thursday dawned, Jack was already awake, his nerves buzzing. He kissed Maria and Ethan goodbye, then slipped the Metro card into his pocket like it was a ticket to a new life. As the train doors closed behind him, he whispered to himself, "No more second chances, this is it." The building wasn't one of the towering glass offices downtown. It was modest, tucked between a cafe and a dry cleaner, the kind of place most people might walk past without noticing. Jack stood outside for a moment, adjusting his shirt cuffs and wiping his damp palms on his slacks. Then he pushed through the glass door. Inside, the lobby was simple. Bright lights, the faint smell of coffee, and a young receptionist who handed him a clipboard with a smile. Jack filled in his details, trying to steady his breathing. "You belong here," he told himself, though his heart was hammering hard enough to drown out the noise around him. When his name was called, he followed a hallway into a small conference room. 2 people sat waiting across a long table, a man with a serious expression and a notebook open in front of him, and a woman whose calm smile softened the edge of the moment. "Jack, thanks for coming," the man said. "Let's get started." The questions came quickly. What projects had he led? How did he deal with tight deadlines? Jack leaned on his years of experience, describing late nights spent building systems, the pride of finishing what others thought impossible. But then came the one that made his stomach clench. "Why did your last position end?" For a second, the room felt too quiet. Jack could have danced around it, could have dressed it up with half-truths. Instead, he took a breath and answered plainly. "The company was cutting costs. I was one of the people they let go. But I want you to know, I didn't stop giving my best until the very last day. Losing that job hasn't made me less capable. If anything, it's made me hungrier to prove myself." The man scribbled something in his notebook. The woman gave a small nod, her eyes steady on him. Another question followed. Tell us about a time you faced a problem that seemed unsolvable. What did you do? Jack thought for a moment, then shared a story about a project that had nearly collapsed under pressure. He described how he stayed late for weeks, working side by side with his team until they found a solution. His voice wavered at first, but as he spoke, confidence crept back in. When the interview finally wrapped, Jack shook their hands, thanked them, and walked out into the crisp air. His legs felt weak, his shirt clinging with sweat. He had told the truth, laid himself bare. But as he made his way back to the subway, doubt gnawed at him. Did they see a man with experience, or just another guy desperate for work, he wondered. All he could do now was wait. The days after the interview stretched endlessly. Jack checked his inbox morning and night, refreshing the page until his eyes blurred. Every vibration of his phone made his heart leap, only to sink when it was just a delivery ad or a reminder about a bill he couldn't pay. Maria noticed the way he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the screen long after the coffee went cold. One evening, as she dried dishes, she said gently, "You gave them your best. That's all you could do. The rest isn't in your hands." Jack nodded, but the doubt lingered. He replayed every answer in his head. Did he sound confident or just desperate? He couldn't tell anymore. Then, late Thursday afternoon, as sunlight faded through their small apartment window, a new email appeared. His pulse raced as he clicked it open. "We're pleased to inform you that we'd like to offer you the position. Please let us know if you're available to discuss details by phone." For a moment, Jack just stared, afraid to blink. His hands trembled as he whispered, "Maria, come here." She hurried over, scanning the screen. Her face lit up and tears filled her eyes. "Jack, it's real. They want you." Before he could even respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered with a shaky voice. On the line was a friendly recruiter confirming the details, welcoming him to the team. Jack's chest tightened as he managed to say, "Yes, I accept. Thank you. Thank you so much." When the call ended, he turned to Maria. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she wrapped her arms around him, holding on as if to anchor them both. Ethan peeked around the corner, curious. "Dad, what happened?" Jack bent down, scooping him up with a laugh that broke into a sob. "Buddy, your dad's got a job again." The boy grinned. "Does that mean we can get the baseball glove now?" Jack kissed the top of his son's head. "One day soon, yeah, I promise." That night, lying in bed, Jack stared at the ceiling again. But this time, the weight pressing on his chest wasn't fear. It was relief, gratitude, and the fragile but steady belief that maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. A week into his new job, Jack still felt a quiet amazement each morning as he buttoned his shirt and rode the subway downtown. The office wasn't flashy, but people valued his ideas, asked for his input, and trusted him with real responsibility. For the first time in months, he came home with stories he was proud to share. But one thought kept tugging at him. Sarah, the young mother who had handed him that card, the stranger who had seen him when he felt invisible. Without her, none of this would have happened. Gratitude filled him, but it didn't feel right to leave it unspoken. So one evening, Jack boarded the same subway line, at the same time, hoping their paths might cross again. For several nights he waited, scanning the crowd, but she never appeared. Still he kept trying. Then one chilly Thursday, as the doors slid open, there she was, Sarah, balancing her folded stroller with one hand, her toddler, just a little bigger now, resting heavily against her shoulder. Her coat was open, her face weary but calm. She didn't notice him at first. Jack's heart thudded. He stepped forward. "Excuse me, Sarah?" She turned, startled, then her expression softened with recognition. "Jack, you look different, happier." He laughed, almost choked by emotion. "I had to find you. I got the job. Your husband's company gave me a chance. I don't even know how to thank you." Her smile spread, warm and genuine. "That's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it." Jack glanced at her son, asleep against her shoulder. "You didn't just hand me a card. You gave me hope when I had none. I'll never forget that." Sarah adjusted her stroller and looked at him thoughtfully. "You know, sometimes we think the little things don't matter, but they do. You stood up for me when you didn't have to. That opened the door to everything that followed." kindness has a way of circling back. The train slowed, the announcement calling out the next stop. Sarah stepped toward the doors. Before leaving, she turned and added softly, "Take care of your family, Jack, and when the time comes, pass it on." Jack watched her disappear into the tide of commuters. He stood there a long moment, his hand in his pocket brushing against his new employee badge, his heart full. He knew he could never repay her, not directly, but he also knew he could honour her words. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly settled into a rhythm again. Jack woke each morning with purpose, riding the subway downtown with the steady hum of commuters around him. His new job wasn't glamorous, but it gave him stability, pride, and the chance to dream again. At home, Maria smiled more, and Ethan bragged at school that his dad built things with computers. Yet Sarah's words lingered, "When the time comes, pass it on." One Friday evening, Jack boarded a crowded train after work. He found a spot near the door and glanced around at the familiar faces of tired strangers. That was when he noticed a young man standing across from him, gripping a folder so tightly the papers inside were bent. His tie was crooked, his shoulders slumped, and his eyes held the same hollow look Jack had carried not long ago. The train jerked, and the young man stumbled. Jack stepped closer. "Rough day?" he asked quietly. The man let out a humourless laugh. "You could say that. First real job out of college, and they let me go this morning. I don't even know where to start." His voice cracked as he looked away, embarrassed. Jack felt a tug deep in his chest. He reached into his wallet and pulled out one of his own business cards. The same way Sarah had once done for him, he held it out. "I don't know if this will lead anywhere, but my company's looking for people. Send me your resume. I'll make sure it gets in front of the right eyes." The young man blinked, startled. "You do that? For someone you don't even know?" Jack smiled, the answer coming easily now. "Someone once did it for me, and it changed everything." The man took the card carefully, almost reverently, as if afraid it might disappear. Jack recognised the mix of fear and fragile hope in his eyes. It was the same look he'd carried on that long night when Sarah had handed him a lifeline. As the train slowed into the next station, Jack felt a quiet peace settle over him. He couldn't repay Sarah directly, but this was how he could honour what she'd given him. He stepped off into the cool evening air, the city buzzing around him, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't just feel like a man who had survived hard times. He felt like someone who had learned what mattered most. Because sometimes one small act of kindness doesn't end. It keeps moving forward, carried from one person to the next. Jack's story reminds us that life can change in the most ordinary places, on a subway, in a single conversation, through a small gesture of kindness. One moment of compassion can open doors, restore hope, and ripple outward in ways we can't predict. The lesson is simple, but powerful. Never underestimate the value of doing something kind, even when you feel like you have nothing left to give. And here's a question for you. If life put someone struggling in your path tomorrow, would you stop, even for a moment, to help them carry the weight? Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with us. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you again on Rain Inside.